Hello, everybody. Welcome. Just getting everything figured out, making sure it's all looking good. Give us 1 second. Glad to have everyone here. Yeah, so thank you guys for holding on there. We want to welcome you guys to Web3's first webinar on Intro to Blockchain, hosted by Hayden and I, Vince Rosini. So diving straight in. We'll start by kind of talking about our company, Web3sy, what it is we do. We're a new startup. Um, we're a new startup that is working to empower young professionals in the tech space. We're based in London. Hayden and I are both interns here, and so this is our kind of our big internship project, and this is kind of the start of Web3sy's hopeful webinar process. They are doing right now a great job at providing comprehensive courses, creating a vibrant community. There's a curated technical blog on the website that are all great resources for people to and check out. It's a great way to kind of get involved in technology. And if you're scared of all the barriers to entry of what goes on in Web3, AI, quantum computing, there's a bunch of great resources. And just now expanding into workshops too, which is a great um, avenue that we're really proud of. And so we wanted to kind of culminate some information and provide a webinar for you. So looking at who we are, my name is Vince. I am going to be a junior at the University of Colorado Boulder. I'm studying computer science and finance. This internship is part of a summer in London finance program. It's been a great opportunity to kind of connect with different people, and it's been a pleasure working with Web3sy and the team. The Inkuru, our founder, has been a great group of mentors, and we're excited to share some more information with you. So here's Hayden to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Hayden Thomas. I'm a rising junior studying finance and accounting at the University of Colorado Boulder. And as Vince mentioned, we are currently on a summer global internship finance program. And so that's why I'm at Web3sy as well. I've really enjoyed my time, and I think it's been a great experience. I think Vince can speak to the same as well. And yeah, we'll move on to our table of contents for today. So, what are we going to be talking about today? So first, we're going to go through the history of blockchain, crypto, kind of how it's developed into the position it's in today, more specifically looking at the history in the early days, so 90s-ish. Then we're going to talk more about the blockchain, which can go on forever, but we've condensed it into what we feel is the most important. Then we're going to talk about mining, whether that be cryptocurrencies or any other kind of mining device on the blockchain, as again, super important to developing that foundational knowledge. We're going to talk about the wallet system that is currently employed on the blockchain and often involves crypto and mining. Then Vince is going to do a deep dive into Ethereum and go really into the weeds and learn a lot of and help you guys learn a lot about it. Then I'll talk about stable coins and then financial applications as I'm more interested in that. And then lastly, we'll have a Q&A session. So this, if you have any questions, make sure to put them in the YouTube chat. And then roughly around the time we get to the Q&A, I'll pull them up and I'll be able to read them off for you. Yeah. So starting on the history of blockchain and whatnot, we have a timeline here. So the first real important piece in the puzzle here was in 1983. This was the first type of cryptographic money. This was the time it was created, and it was called eCash. So this was super important in the overall development of the blockchain and the whole idea of bringing money to an online system. Then in 1995 was another big. This was when eCash was implemented into DigiCash, which was untraceable by a third party. This was the big time where what most people are thinking of when they think of cryptocurrency basically being untrackable to an extent and being well integrated into the online world. Next is in 1998, B-Money and BitGold were created as a cash distribution network and proof of work currencies. So we'll talk about proof of work more heavily later in the presentation, but this was a huge turning point as proof of work was something that was fundamental in the creation of the blockchain. And then lastly, probably the most notable turning point was in 2008 when anonymous writer Satoshi Nakamoto released the Bitcoin white paper, which led to a lot of the crypto that we see today, whether it be Bitcoin, to an extent, Ethereum, and other cryptocurrencies. So that's a brief overview of the timeline.
Perfect. So going now into the kind of the financial landscape leading into this time frame when 2008 in 2008 and 2009 Satoshi Nakamoto came up with the idea and then implemented the idea of Bitcoin. So amidst that, amidst the financial crisis of 2008, that was a big time. Lehman Brothers Bank had just kind of collapsed, and Satoshi and a lot of people online saw a need for more, um, I guess, saw the problem with these central banks and these government institutions, and people were questioning whether if they are making the best decisions for us. Do we actually want them to make decisions for us? And how, especially now that the internet has created this connected world, how could we possibly design a new financial landscape that avoids this traditional trusted third party platform? And so, like Hayden said, there was the idea that cryptography can help facilitate digital transactions. Public private key encryption had been widespread at this point and allowed for the transfer of information, which obviously had been starting to be implemented into these other forms of digital currencies. And then also with hashing algorithms, this allowed for basically Satoshi to come up with the idea of, do we actually need third parties? And this was the central idea behind decentralization and his idea for a blockchain Bitcoin network. So looking at blockchain, the goal when first designed in the white paper in 2008 was to create a peer-to-peer digital transaction system. So as opposed to traditional financial institutions where a transaction between Hayden and I, for example, would go through a bank and then possibly a central bank for this money to get transferred in between two parties, with the banks providing the trustworthy institution in the middle. The goal here was to use cryptography, and as you can see by this image, the private keys and public keys of individuals to make this transaction happen without anyone else. So, for instance, the idea was already kind of in existence where you can use a public key. So, with two forms of with public private key encryption, you can have a private key, which is like a wallet, which we'll get to later, and then a public key, which is out in the world, and you can use that information to use my own private key to encrypt something that then someone else can decrypt with a public key, or vice versa, or I can use someone else's public key that they can only then decrypt with their private key. And it allows for these transactions to go on without having to use a trusted third party. But when you cut out this middleman, the biggest problem that arises is double spending. So double spending problem goes somewhat like if I have a $5 or £5 note and I go to a restaurant or a corner store or wherever it is, and I choose to buy something, I can use that cash and I'll get my item exchange. And there's no possibility of spending it again because it's a physical piece of cash. But when you use contactless and when you use credit cards and Apple Pay and these more um, online forms of currencies, it comes up where, um, say, I wanted to spend this money that I have in my account at this corner store, and I spend $5 for a packet of crisps, and they gave me the crisps, but I can then go and if I were to go to a different place and at the same time spend $5 and only had $5 in my account, spent it. I could also get another item, another candy bar, and spending the same $5 due to the fact that the transaction hadn't been broadcasted. So traditionally, in traditional finance, there's a bank that oversees this, that approves transactions. And then also there's overdraft fees that they'll charge on you if you spend more than what you have. And so either you can't spend that $5 twice because they are approving transactions. They see the transactions come in and they'll approve one or the other, even if they were at the exact same time. And then both won't go through. But with this, without a trusted third party, you can't have this happen. You don't have any person or singular organization that is overseeing these transactions. So instead, you have everyone overseeing it. So everyone part of the network has access to this blockchain, and a blockchain is an immutable form of transaction history. So it contains the data for all these transactions over since the beginning of Bitcoin or for whatever cryptocurrency you're using. It goes back to the very beginning and it has every transaction on it, and it stores. So what it stores is basically a ledger of the previous block, and then also all the transactions going on at this time. So when you make a transaction with Bitcoin, you will get added to a block where on this block, as you can see, there's the previous hash. So it has a pointer to the previous block in the blockchain. And that way everything gets sequentially set up and you avoid double transactions. And then who, anyone on the internet can get access to this blockchain, to this ledger. It's shared among the whole network. And then as it kind of mentioned, it helps reduce the need for a third party because you can have people approve these transactions and everyone agrees on this singular blockchain. And therefore, you're not having any singular party try and spend something twice because you can see what a transaction is made. And the second they make that first transaction, it'll be put on this blockchain, which is immutable. It won't get changed. It's impossible to go back and change the blockchain. And this prevents manipulation, this prevents the double spending, and is a huge key aspect to Bitcoin's success and how cryptocurrencies have been able to succeed.
Pardon me. Going into more specifically what is a block, it records the most recent transactions with a timestamp. Again, this is to help keep track of where everything is happening and making sure that it's adequately aligned. It also contains a reference to the previous block. That way, people are able to tell exactly where the chain leads. So that's where the chain aspect of blockchain comes from. Now, it's also important, people are competing to generate these different blocks. So that is how specifically it goes from block to block to block. On Bitcoin, I believe right now there's around about 20 minutes to, I believe, an hour, but in between blocks. And so each block is created by someone mining the currency, and they, in theory, win. And then they get they get the Bitcoin at the beginning, and that's where the block starts, otherwise known as the coin base. And then transactions pile on, and this block will be eventually validated by having more and more people use it. Now I'll hand it back over to Vince.
So first looking at this mining process, um, the as Hayden kind of mentioned, in order to approve of these transactions and to make sure everyone is agreeing on the same transactions, the same time that they're happening, what order. So whether it's me buying a bag of chips or me buying a candy bar, whichever one goes first, there's a component where you need the whole network, the group to agree upon what order, what transactions, how everything be set up on this blockchain. Is incredibly important because once it gets put on the blockchain, it can't be reversed. So the basically the whole idea of mining is that you can use the computational power of computers and hashing algorithms to in a way earn the right to record transactions. So you've probably heard of people that are getting into Bitcoin mining, trying to get some money. They're trying to get that first Coinbase transaction, as Hayden previously mentioned. And it's also a way of launching new coins into general circulation. So these Coinbase transactions that are given to miners are basically Bitcoin that are created out of thin air. They're not sent by anyone else. Um, they are purely just the only kind of form of monetary policy that exists in Bitcoin. And so, kind of going more into what some mining is. So, there's two different consensus mechanisms. So, the way that the entire network of people agree upon which transaction, which block gets put into the next blockchain. The most common of which is proof of work. This is what was originally designed with Satoshi in 2008 to have this consensus on what the blockchain looks like and how we can actually make this consensus come together. So, proof of work largely involves GPU to solve cryptographic puzzles. So, there's something called a hashing algorithm, which can uh, turn plain text into hash text through a hash function, and it's one-way encryption. So you have this hash text, and it's impossible to get the original plain text from that hash text. So when you have all of this data that we mentioned being stored on this block, including a timestamp, a reference to the last block, and all of the transactions that are going on this block, you then put that you give a singular hash, almost like a name, a number to this block on the blockchain. And you do this by performing a hashing algorithm. So when you hear of these mining rigs, as you can see, there's a computer with these GPUs, and these GPUs are basically doing this hash function, which is in some form just really complex math that it's over and over and over doing this hashing function until it reaches a minimum. So there's a hash looks like a super long series of numbers, and if you take that as a number, as a regular number, you can then make sure that it's under a certain value. So in a sense, you're looking for consecutive zeros in the beginning of your hash, and once you are the first computer to first GPU to find this consecutive zero, you emit it to the network, tell everyone that you won the race, and you put the next block on, and then everyone kind of adopts that. And as you can see, this has grown to be an incredibly profitable and powerful industry with entire data centers of these GPUs doing these cryptographic puzzles simply to verify the transactions that people do on a daily basis. So, like I kind of said before, it's a race to solve the hash. And once you are the first person to find that minimum hash, or that hash that's under the maximum value, I should say, you tell all the other computers around you, and the longest chain always gets used. So this um, this means that once you're the person to find that block and you send it out to other people, if people start building on top of that block as well, putting more transactions on that, then you'll add another block, and that chain will be used. Whereas, say, I on my measly Mac computer was trying to mine a block, and I had all these transactions, and I put them together, and I was hashing them, and I had a current version of the blockchain up on my computer, and I finally got this hashing algorithm to work, and I put it on the chain. But then all these other fast computers, in the span of the 30 minutes it took me to get that one hash, they've already added three different blocks to this blockchain. So my blockchain would be shorter. It would have two less blocks, which means you'd be out of date. So it's always using that longest blockchain to ensure that everyone is agreeing on this consensus. And you hear a lot about the energy consumption of blockchain, of proof of work, specifically of Bitcoin. And this is one of the biggest downsides with the technology today. This kind of gives you an idea of the amount of energy consumption and emissions by Bitcoin compared to other things in the world. How it may look like a small circle down here in the bottom right corner, but simply that one system is comparing to these biggest, these like air conditioning, all these different ways of using energy today that are really contributing to this climate change, to this carbon emission. So it is definitely a problem with the current system today, is how much energy all these computers in these data systems are using just to purely verify these transactions and to try and implement this form of trustworthiness in a decentralized system. So kind of a final interesting thing is, with those data centers, with that verification process, as more and more people are getting into um, this proof of work, this Bitcoin mining area, and as companies like NVIDIA and other GPU manufacturers are producing better and better and better GPUs, the difficulty level of being that computer to find the correct hash to win the race is getting harder and harder. So I had said before that it's about finding consecutive zeros. So whereas in the beginning, people could be running these hashing algorithms on their own computers, getting one or two consecutive zeros in this hashing algorithm, and uh, being the actual computer to add to the next block and get that Coinbase, get that money, or at least Bitcoin in that sense, and then possibly convert it to money, to cash. Nowadays, it takes these giant rigs, these incredibly complex computers, and it actually is starting to take away from the central idea or the idea of decentralization. So what the entire goal of Bitcoin and blockchain was in the beginning was to take the power out of certain individuals. It's almost putting power back in them as these groups can go about this verification process. You have these giant mining facilities, oftentimes used to be predominantly in China until China banned it, and now it's in the south of the United States and other areas that are, dominating this problem. And as you can see by these graphs, it shows the hash rate. So actually, that kind of corresponds to how powerful these computers are, how much better they are at doing this algorithm than before, and it's just exponential growth. On the right, you can see from the beginning of Bitcoin, and then on the left, you can see just the past year. And the hashing rate has drastically increased. And then on the black, you can see how difficult. So the puzzle that they have to solve constantly gets more and more difficult to accommodate for this, to keep the time frame the exact same every time. And so that's growing in difficulty as well. And it's as this race towards the top happens, it becomes less and less feasible, or practically at this point, entirely infeasible for regular people to get in and mine these Bitcoins. Instead, you have to have these giant data centers. And so one solution to this is the idea of proof of stake. So this is more recent. It didn't originally come out with Bitcoin, with the proof of work system, people started to think, how can we reduce the energy? And this is most closely associated with Ethereum. And as you can see, this is a picture of Ethereum 1.0, which was when Ethereum was originally on that traditional proof of work consensus mechanism. And then since they've merged and adopted proof of stake, it has drastically decreased the power demand. So a little bit on how it works. People stake money into a central pot as much in a form. So instead of people investing in consensus and these mining systems by buying GPUs, they're directly putting money into this giant pot. And whether you put in $10,000 or $1 million adjusts the odds of being chosen. So it's a direct ratio of what percentage, how likely you are to get the money in a sense, um, is based off of how much you're putting into the system. So you're staking your own money as opposed to staking your energy and your computer usage. And there's a different reward system, and we'll go more into kind of the backings of Ethereum in the future. Um, in a couple slides. But the reward system here is not like Bitcoin, where the first transaction is giving Bitcoins to the user. Instead, it's a gas system that I'll explain, but it's still giving money, but it's in a different form. And then the biggest problem with proof of stake right now is that it's still very new. It's unsure how um, widespread it can get, whether or not it will be able to sort it as big of a network as Bitcoin has right now. There are a couple of coins, as you can see in the top right. There's Ethereum and there's Solana, that are implementing this and trying to do different forms. They're slightly different in how they do this consensus mechanism, but it's definitely interesting to see if this project continues and succeeds, and this could be a major factor in whether or not Bitcoin, blockchain, and cryptocurrencies are feasible into the future.
So I'll now talk a little bit about the wallet, which is a key point into how blockchain and how cryptocurrencies work overall. Mhm. So the big part of how you actually get access to these wallet is the types of keys. So first, obviously, is your public key. So this is how, when you think of how someone sends Bitcoin to another person through, let's say, for an NFT or any other kind of transaction, their public keys are exchanged. So this is similar to an email address. You can see who sent, you can see who received, and that kind of is the limit of that. Now, when you hear people about losing thousands of Bitcoins or losing access to a wallet, that's where the private key comes in. So this is an alphanumeric code generated by your wallet, and it gives you access to your personal vault. So again, this is something that is not shared or it's not accessible, almost like an email password, but it gets you into your account. It also uses a heavy level of encryption. Again, you're not necessarily creating this password. It's basically given to you by whatever wallet you use. And that way it's very secure. But then again, you also run the risk of it often can easily lost or people forget part of it. And then that's when you see people really scared that they lose their entire wallet and then they can't get into it anymore because again, this is your only way to get in. There's no backup, no forgot password method. And then there's two types of wallets. Again, you have both hot and cold. So a hot wallet is kind of active. It's connected to the internet. It's necessary for your everyday transaction, but it is more vulnerable to attacks. So again, this is your kind of wallet that you see on a blockchain website tracking that shows where the different coins are going. Again, it is how you tell where stuff is going and people can see that as well. And then there's another version of a cold wallet. This is not connected to the internet and it's safer as direct access is required. So this is something you often think of when a person has like a bunch of Bitcoins on a hard drive, let's say. This is considered a cold wallet because it's not connected to the internet in any way. It's just on your computer and it's stored somewhere. Again, it's safer as you often have to plug it in and then enter a different key compared to a hot wallet. A hot wallet's going to be connected to the internet and is something you'll traditionally see as something like a Coinbase or a marketplace, for example, where the wallets need to be able to be moved and you need to be able to get in or take out currency. And then now moving on to types of account, there's custodial and non-custodial. This again plays into what I previously mentioned with um, companies such as Coinbase or crypto.com. Again, so a custodial account is hosted by a third party. This is those kinds of accounts. But something important about this is that it goes against your traditional Bitcoin views. As we've mentioned throughout this entire webinar, Bitcoin was very much about decentralization and other people keeping track of each other to then grow the network. But having this custodial account, again, goes against it because it's under a centralized system, Coinbase, crypto.com, any other kind of those platforms. And again, it's more vulnerable to attacks because it's not necessarily held with the same encryption level as with your Coinbase account. Let's say you have a regular password and then you can click forget password and relog into the account. So it's very much easier for someone to hack into it. Now, a non-custodial account is you're responsible for your keys. And this means, again, you have to write it down or save it somewhere. And if you don't have access to it, then you lose access to the wallet. There's sovereign control, again, fully in your hand, or what you do with it is up to you. There is faster transactions as you're not going through a third party like crypto or Coinbase, excuse me. But you could lose everything if you forget your passphrase or encryption, as previously mentioned. And again, with the custodial accounts, you're not responsible for your keys. The Coinbase or other companies like that, they will manage the keys for you, which takes a lot of the responsibility out of it. Then again, you could possibly face hacks or other ways that your account might get lost. Again, it's something to consider when you're trying to get involved in the blockchain or crypto space. You have to decide what risks do you want to take, where do you want to take those risks, and how do you want to balance it. And then Vince will talk about Ethereum here.
Yeah, so that kind of gives you guys a full overview of the biggest three factors in blockchain, what kind of goes into blockchain, what exactly is a block, what this mining process looks like, and then what a wallet actually is. So that's kind of a initial, if you ever wanted to invest, if you wanted to just understand what was going on in the news when these buzzwords get thrown out, and even sometimes the more underlying math and explanations, which a lot of websites and a lot of people who are even involved in cryptocurrencies don't fully understand. So now kind of going into more of the application side of it, what blockchain is looking like now, what its impact might be for the future. Ethereum, this cryptocurrency that initially um, came out with that proof of stake, like I said before, is one of the biggest players in the crypto game and what many people see as the future and almost a poster child of cryptocurrencies for having a positive impact. So its beginnings, it was designed in 2014 by Vitalik, um, who was just 20 at the time, and he was very involved in applications of Bitcoin, in what Bitcoin does. He knew a lot about cryptocurrencies, but he saw a kind of an area that wasn't fully being implemented into traditional cryptocurrencies, especially blockchain. Um, and he wanted to kind of further these applications with his own cryptocurrency. And this was at a time where this, and then especially in the future, once it reached around 2018, everyone would come out with different cryptocurrencies. I'm sure everyone's heard of almost meme coins, they're called, where there's these different jokes of coins that really have no use, but will get investments just because people want to, they'll throw their money in it. And this was kind of before that, but it was something that people immediately latched onto for how applicable it could be and what it could actually change in this space. So kind of the central component that um, Ethereum had that was building on um, traditional Bitcoin, traditional blockchain was an EVM or Ethereum virtual machine. So what this does is, or I guess the start was Vitalik saw that you could do some transactions or automated transactions through Bitcoin. You could um, kind of skirt the normal transaction type and have a transaction that doesn't necessarily need two people at the computer clicking it right away. That can be some sort of whether that's approval process. So if you could say, oh, I want X amount of another coin, or I want this pizza, whatever it is, and you could have that almost contract be made. And it was this kind of central start of this idea of smart contracts and this transaction that does not need to be actively inputted by two different parties and instead can be automated. And of course, this is a very important thing today, especially in the financial landscape. In has a whole bunch of applications, but in terms of expanding its usage beyond the simple, almost workarounds that were in Bitcoin at the time, Vitalik saw this idea for an Ethereum virtual machine, which essentially hosted this software across all the computers in the network. It's called Geth, um, and if you are wanting to kind of contribute to this network, to this virtual machine, you can download the software. And basically, what it does is, whereas a normal computer, when you are running code, um, it will be reduced down to bytecode and then uh, implemented onto your CPU on your computer. There wouldn't in a decentralized system, you wouldn't want a singular CPU. So instead, you have all these computers running the software, contributing to this network that are then acting as a almost CPU, so that when you write smart contracts, which smart contracts are essentially just code on the blockchain. It's something that'll maybe say, you can code it to say, I want Hayden to um, give me 5 ETH coins when I give him 1 Bitcoin. And this process isn't exactly, it can't go directly. Or so instead, you write a smart contract that will facilitate the transaction without having both people on both sides to be kind of doing it manually. So then when you write this code, you can upload it to this software, this Ethereum Geth, and um, all the computers can implement it onto the blockchain. And then once you have this smart contract on the blockchain, anyone can use it. It's almost like a vendor. You can go back and forth, assuming that the contract allows for it, um, based off of what is coded in it, and you can constantly do these transactions over and over and over again. Um, and it's an excellent way of automating processes and has um, amazing applications that really expanded upon the simple, almost trading system of Bitcoin, and has is incredibly intuitive. And this Ethereum virtual machine, kind of the bread and butter of Ethereum, many people are kind of hailing that as the future for finance. So kind of looking more at the EVM and smart contracts. Um, there's this network of computers that are holding up this Ethereum virtual machine, and then people can go and they can write code. So this supported languages like Solidity, the logos you can see in the top right, and this is a coding language just like any other coding language, C++, Python, and it essentially writes this code that then you can compile down compile down into bytecode and then send it off into the Ethereum network. And supported by this network of computers, you can run it. You can do all these different applications, further applications with smart contracts. So it's whatever you can code. You can code transactions. You can code all these different systems. And when Vitalik originally came up with the idea in 2014 in his white paper, his kind of announcement of Ethereum, he saw these three applications, which are very widespread, but he said there's token systems. So as opposed to a Bitcoin or a ETH coin, you could have a token, which is a kind of a one of one system. So this could be applied to a like a plot of land or a picture online. There's non-fungible tokens or NFTs, which most people have heard of, but it's this way of kind of giving access to something beyond just the simple currency, something beyond just the money and having actual products and tokens with them. And then there was also the idea of financial derivatives and stable value currencies. So this would be this is an incredibly important aspect of smart contracts, whereas you can hedge, you can do all these different financial activities that are facilitated through the smart contract, as opposed to a simple kind of trading system, which might not have this in the first place. So you can have money being stored in these smart contracts. Smart contracts have their address of their own. Um, excuse me. And it allows for these financial systems to be automated, to be actually implemented. And then you can have stable value currencies. You can have like Luna and Terra, which have exactly the best system, but the idea and this idea of pegging different currencies to each other is incredibly important. And then finally, you can have identity and reputation systems. So this was something where he Vitalik mentioned it as a if you wanted we talked about private addresses or public addresses. So you have your public key out in the world, and that's kind of a weird way of associating your name with something, and that's like your wallet. So instead you wanted to have a name. You could then use smart contracts and the Ethereum blockchain to correspond a name like Vince with a wallet, and it's like a first come first serve, almost like a traditional kind of domain name system, naming system, and allows you to have more customization. And this, of course, is fun, but also has lots of more applicable kind of uses. And so, a lot of these uses ended up coming into this world of decentralized applications, which is kind of the term that has been applied to any smart contract or kind of group of applications that you can use through the implementation of smart contract. And it's run on this blockchain. It has this peer-to-peer nature of it by this Ethereum virtual machine as, like it says, a network of computers instead of a single computer. So one of the coolest decentralized apps, in my opinion, and it's incredibly popular. It's one of the most widely used one is Uniswap. So you, if you've ever bought cryptocurrencies, you have definitely used a exchange, a centralized exchange. So this is something like Coinbase or Kraken, or of course FTX was also one, infamously. And the problem with these centralized exchanges is that it puts the hands or the power back in the hands of a few people, as opposed to this decentralized nature that is supposed to be implemented into these blockchains at its core. So you have a third party that is facilitating this change of fiat currency, or like USD, pounds, GBP, into these cryptocurrencies. And instead of having, and then between cryptocurrencies as well is the biggest thing. So instead of having this third party that is facilitating that, holding your money, which you might not trust, as clearly happened with FTX when it crashed, instead you can use these smart contracts to facilitate these trades, this almost conversion of cryptocurrencies within each other without having a third party on the other side. So if I have 100 Bitcoin and I want to convert that into Ethereum, instead of having this company buy my Bitcoin, give me Ethereum, you can use Uniswap, which liquidity pools, which essentially allows for there are is there's currency already stored in Uniswap. So there's 1,000 Bitcoins, and then with that pegged to that is these Ethereums. So there's this constant ratio of Bitcoin to Ethereum that matches the price difference out there, which essentially is the price, is the conversion between Bitcoin and Ethereum corresponds to the price of the good. And so you have these liquidity pools. And they're constantly adjusting in size and being put to this central ratio. So I can put these Bitcoin in and then I can get this Ethereum out, and people are constantly putting things in. And this completely negates the need for a third party centralized exchange to be behind the scenes, and is an incredible application that could really adjust and bring more of a future to these cryptocurrencies when there's a lot of distrust right now in FTX and these other exchanges, and whether or not what they're doing with your money is completely truthful. And so um, that's a great opportunity for the future. And looking more into the future of DeFi and decentralized finance, there's the look at recently in the news, there was Ethereum spot ETFs. So allowing for people to invest in Ethereum previously earlier this year in Bitcoin through traditional markets, ETFs through offered on more traditional exchanges rather than having to actually go through this system of buying Bitcoin, especially on one of these centralized exchanges that might not be trustworthy. And then there's also a huge future in kind of cutting out the middleman with these smart contracts, with these decentralized apps. There's a whole world of decentralized apps. There's, as you can see, all the ones on screen that have different applications. A lot of them are kind of traditional apps, traditional ideas. YouTube is one that's kind of, and of course, a bunch of others that are instead of being hosted by these kind of centralized networks, you can have a decentralized network, you can have people working on them, and then you don't have to have a middleman taking money. But with this Ethereum and this world of decentralized finance, there are a couple different drawbacks that are really posing a threat to the system right now. One of which is gas fees. So Ethereum, I kind of mentioned it before, but to make this transaction, to host a smart contract, you need to put a little bit of your own money in the system. And this avoids denial of service or overloading the Ethereum blockchain. With these smart contracts, it'd be easy to have a transaction run infinitely in a sense and completely break the whole blockchain. But instead, to avoid that, you have to actually put your own money in. So if you were to do that, you'd be risking all of your money or as much money as you have. And then that's also the limiting factor. Instead of the network and the ability to process transaction, it's just how much money you have. And this also leads into kind of arbitration, which is possible at this point, with the way that transactions get chosen. And when you have these big players in the market trying to do these traditional finance, these futures and stuff like that, that Hayden will talk about more, it's easy to jump the line with these gas fees because the more you pay, the faster your transaction will go, and this poses a threat. And then finally, the biggest one is volatility. So as everyone knows, blockchain or Bitcoin, sorry, goes up and down in price at the drop of a hat, and it's not exactly a viable currency. It's not something that you could go and buy a house with when the cost is constantly changing. And further, the social views on it aren't exactly in the right place right now. So these are all things that kind of need to be worked out, need to be implemented on. Of course, it's very early in the history and there's a lot of hope for the future, but these are kind of the potential threats right now. So finally, kind of going into stablecoins, here's Hayden.
Yeah, thank you, Vince. Again, I kind of want to be respectful of your guys' time. I'm not going to take too long here, as we are kind of approaching our time. But again, I wanted to talk a little bit about stable coins. As Vince mentioned, often Bitcoin is viewed as something that is not super easy to use for regular day transactions, such as buying a house. So the stable coins kind of step in and do that for us. So I want to introduce like what is a stable coin. So it's pegged to another currency in this case. So a lot of times they are directly pegged to the US dollar. And as you can see in the photo on the screen, those are some of your main, I guess, players in the stablecoin space. So a stablecoin will serve more as a form of an exchange, and they have formulas to control supply. Again, it's going to be pegged to a currency in some way so that the value is stable. Now, there's been some instances where it's not 100% exactly one-to-one value, but most of the time it is pretty close. And that's the goal with these, is that people can use something on the blockchain network and still be able to have consistent value throughout, no matter when you use it, because it's not as volatile as something as Bitcoin. And again, formulas are used to control supply. That way it stays stable, hence the name stable coin, as you're not going to see increased volatility. And then another important part is that it's used by it's used as collateral by definanced and deregulated platforms, as it can hold its value. And then, so one of the big players in the stablecoin space is Tether. So it's the third largest crypto overall, behind behind Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so part of what makes Tether and these other stablecoins very special is that they're transparent compared to other cryptos. So it's very easy to tell their financials and very easy to see their overall liquidity. That way, people feel confident in using the coin, and there's no variation where they feel like they might be getting scammed or ripped off. And it doesn't use an exact pegging value of $1 USD. It's slightly below, but then again, it has slight variations, but it's not nearly as volatile as something like Bitcoin. That way, it's able to be used in bigger transactions for something in the future, hopefully like buying a house. And then next, this is another big one, the USD coin. So again, it's a stable coin pegged to the USD. Sometimes it does get confused being related to the US government or being launched by the US government. It's not. It's a completely separate thing launched by Circle and in collaboration with Coinbase. Again, it's bigger than Tether market size wise, according to Visa, the credit card company. However, that kind of is up in the air as far as I could tell when I researched it. And then another important part about USD coin and Circle is that it actually got recently approved in the EU following the implementation of the EU's many new crypto laws. So this was a huge step for stable coins as well as just crypto in general, is that getting access to the EU and being validated through their new guidelines proves a big step forward and possible growth of the cryptocurrency industry. Now, again, USD coin is very similar to stablecoin in the sense of it's something that is roughly one to the US dollar. Sometimes there is some dips, like with the Silicon Valley bank collapse of a few years ago. They had some assets tied up, so there was a slight dip, and I believe it was recovered in about 4 days. So obviously, it's not 100% perfect, but it is overall very good and very consistent at its job. And then next, I want to go into the finance applications of crypto and where it can grow and where it can change. Um, so it seems like a small number, but this is actually incredibly large in the grand scheme of things. Roughly 3.4% of total Bitcoin is held by asset manager or asset manager companies for that matter. Now, this is huge because it often goes against the original idea of decentralization and the overall Bitcoin model. But when you have 3.4% held by big companies such as Grayscale Investments, who run one of the largest spot Bitcoin ETFs, which I'll get into a little bit later, it's often good and bad. It gets access to more people and grows crypto overall. But then again, it also reduces the decentralization of the currency because you're tying up so much in these big, large corporations, which kind of again goes against what the original white paper was about in reducing the power being in the hands of controlling just a few people. So some of the finance applications we see for crypto um, is just it being accepted into more traditional kinds of investments. So obviously Bitcoin specifically is moving. So you see a lot of ETFs, futures, and options. Futures got approved in the US for Bitcoin at the end of 2021, I believe. And then spot ETFs were a brand new thing that got approved in, I believe, January 21st of this year, but very beginning of the year. So they're still very new and developing. But it often allows people to get into this crypto space and grow the investment opportunities. So now, what are crypto ETFs? Again, it's a new idea that's been brought to the market, specifically being able to be bought by consumers. However, it's existed and been around since around 2013, 2014, when the original ideas for Bitcoin ETFs were pitched. Now, if you are buying into a crypto ETF, it is again very much like a normal ETF where you aren't buying specific coins or you're not owning them, but rather you buy a share of a fund that owns the coin. So one of the largest ones that got approval through the SEC was the Grayscale spot ETF, and you're buying a share of Grayscale's ETF, and Grayscale is managing and controlling the wallet that has the Bitcoin. So again, you're not dealing with the actual Bitcoin itself. Now, these crypto ETFs have struggled through a ton of legal issues in the USA with the lawsuits being filed with the SEC. So these originally were trying to be approved by the Winklevoss twins, who that name may sound vaguely familiar, but they were the ones who originally worked with Mark Zuckerberg for Facebook, and there was all the lawsuits with the Facebook side. Well, they eventually moved into the crypto space after, and they were originally fighting to get one of these ETFs approved. But there was constant battles in between. But then eventually Grayscale Investments sued the SEC after their ETF got declined because they said it was too broad and the SEC was basically just didn't want it to happen. So there was tons of lawsuits, but then again, it finally got approved in January of this year, and there was massive growth since then. And these ETFs make it easier to get involved with crypto, but it still relies on the blockchain to an extent where the asset managers are still actively involved in the blockchain, but you as the consumer don't have to deal with that. You don't have to worry about the passwords, the managing. Rather, you can just focus on your investments and diversifying your portfolio. And yeah. So there is some drawbacks to this, obviously. These traditional financial applications move crypto from being used as a currency, which was its original idea, or a form of money. Now, it's being more stuck in line with traditional investments, which is not great in the grand scheme of things. But if you're looking to invest and grow your portfolio, crypto has developed a lot and is seeming developing more towards that side. Again, with the ETFs, it's more shifting towards like Ethereum's getting an ETF in the future, at least hopes. There's a lot of approval and regulatory deals there. But the hope is that, you know, the asset managers want it to move more towards a traditional investment, but a lot of people still believe Bitcoin can be used as a traditional like money-like currency where it's used like the US dollar and it's used for everyday transactions. But again, we won't exactly know how this plays out probably for another 20 years down the line as blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum, ETFs, and all of that kind of develops and improved. And so lastly, we just wanted to say, or we wanted to move on to the Q&A actually. So if there's anybody who has any questions, please put them in the chat and we will answer them as we can. There is a slight delay on the stream, so it may be a bit until we read it. Mhm. We'll wait for a couple minutes. Um, Well, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but if you do have any, make sure to check out our various different social media profiles or get in contact with us. Um, so we just wanted to say thank you. We really enjoyed having you view today. Don't forget, you can email us at the link there, and then we can be found on all social medias at that tag Web3sy. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, and Discord. And thank you. Actually, it looks like we have one question in the chat here. How secure is blockchain and is blockchain hackable? Vince, you did a little more, a bit of a dive into that. Would you like to discuss it? I can.
Yeah, so that's the security of blockchain is kind of a interesting topic nowadays. There has been a lot of different hacks over the course of its history, a lot of different security breaches, some of which being just user error. We kind of talked about wallets and security there. Others being associated with the more centralized aspects of it. So people stealing money from these centralized exchanges. Um, there, um, in terms of actually the general security, it's almost hard to say. It's kind of like any system where, you know, it's as it'll be more and more implemented, it will be the risks associated to it will become more and more clear. But one of the best things that crypto and blockchain and Web3 has going for it is just the user base, the amount of developers that are passionate about the system, that whenever a security breach does happen, they are quick, find the cause to fix it, to cover up any future um, hacks, any future security breaches, and whether or not how safe it is hard to say. There have been hacks in the past. There will be hacks in the future. Luckily, with as wide of a user base, a lot of times these problems can be fixed. But like any financial system, anything that's getting started off, there's still things that kind of need to be implemented. And this a lot of times gets related to the early days of almost the wild west of traditional banking. Of banks do get robbed, and there are issues that happen. And I think as things get more accepted, there is the possibility of more of a kind of a government insurance. And there's a whole talk on government regulation and its part in this process. And it's something that has a future for if this gets widely accepted and it eventually changes the world. So yeah, great question.
So I think that looks like it's it. I don't see any more questions in the chat. Again, thank you for your time today, and we really love doing this, and hopefully you see more wonderful content from Web3sy. Thank you.